My name is Olivia Morgan, 23 years old, delivering pizzas in the pouring rain when most people my age are out enjoying their Friday nights. My hands ache from my morning barista shift as I balance this pepperoni special under my umbrella. Meanwhile, my brother Ethan is probably at some club, spending our parents' money without a second thought. They've always had different rules for us, his path smoothed with opportunities while I struggled just to keep my electricity on. I never expected anything to change until that rainy night when a familiar face from the past recognized me. Before I tell you how I went from delivering pizzas in the rain to completely turning my life around, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the underdog in your own family. Growing up in our middle-class suburban Connecticut neighborhood, the difference in how my parents treated Ethan and me wasn't immediately obvious to outsiders. Our house on Maple Street had 4 bedrooms, a neat front yard, and all the appearances of the American dream. My father Richard worked as a regional manager for an insurance company, and my mother Sophia taught piano lessons from our living room. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. At least not financially. The favoritism revealed itself in small ways at first. When I was 7, I spent an entire weekend creating a watercolor painting of our family for the school art show. I won second place, but my parents missed the ceremony because Ethan had a Little League game. My certificate ended up in a drawer somewhere, while his participation trophies for sports occupied the entire mantelpiece. "We have to support your brother," my mother would explain gently whenever I expressed disappointment. Boys have it harder in today's world. They need more encouragement. By the time I turned 12, the pattern was undeniable. Ethan's birthday parties were elaborate affairs with hired entertainers and custom cakes. Mine were afterthoughts, usually just dinner at a restaurant if I was lucky. When I questioned this, my father would ruffle my hair and say, "You're so independent, Olivia. You'll be fine without all that fuss." Their words became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I learned to be independent because I had no choice. I started babysitting at 13, saving every dollar while Ethan received an allowance for doing nothing more than existing. I taught myself Photoshop using library computers because art classes were too expensive, yet somehow there was always money for Ethan's hockey equipment. The inequality became impossible to ignore when we turned 16. On Ethan's 16th birthday, my parents surprised him with a used but decent Honda Civic. When my birthday came 6 months later, my father handed me a bus schedule and information about working permits. "We believe in teaching you responsibility," he explained. "You'll appreciate it more if you earn it yourself." I worked weekends and summers for almost 2 years before I could afford a 15-year-old Toyota with questionable brakes and no air conditioning. Meanwhile, when Ethan dented his car at a party, our parents paid for repairs without a single lecture. College planning brought the most painful discrepancy. Throughout high school, I maintained a 3.9 GPA while working part-time. I joined every free extracurricular I could fit between shifts and studied late into the night. My dream was attending Parsons School of Design for graphic design. When acceptance letters arrived, I received a partial scholarship, but not enough to cover the full cost. "We've been putting money aside for both your educations," my mother had promised for years. Yet when the time came, I discovered my college fund had been borrowed for Ethan's first business venture, an app for rating craft beers that never made it past the development stage. He had dropped out of community college after 1 semester to become an entrepreneur. "It's an investment in his future," my father explained. "You can take out loans. With your grades, you'll be fine." I ended up at the State University with crushing student debt while working 30 hours a week. Meanwhile, Ethan bounced between startups, each one funded by my parents, each one failing due to his lack of commitment. Throughout all this, one figure remained a mystery in our family: Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother. He had disappeared from our lives when I was 14 after a massive argument with my father. I remember raised voices behind closed doors, words like irresponsible and betrayal floating through the house. Afterward, we never spoke of him again. Family photos with him were removed. When I asked what happened, my father would change the subject immediately. "Some people just don't belong in your life," he would say with finality. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving of my sophomore year of college. I was exhausted from midterms and picking up extra shifts to cover textbook costs. At dinner, my parents excitedly announced they were helping Ethan lease office space for his second failed startup's revival. "This one's really going to take off," Ethan boasted, not even acknowledging how his first venture had swallowed my education fund. When I quietly mentioned my struggle to afford next semester's tuition, my mother patted my hand and said, "Maybe you should consider taking a semester off to save up." I looked around the table, at my brother's entitled smile, at my father's proud gaze directed only at his son, at my mother's dismissive comfort, and something inside me finally broke. I moved out that weekend. At 19, I found a tiny studio apartment with a roommate and committed to complete financial independence. I would rather struggle on my own terms than be treated as an afterthought in my own family. For years later, at 23, my life had become an endless cycle of work and sleep with barely anything in between. My apartment was in the kind of neighborhood real estate agents optimistically call up and coming, code for high crime rates and neglected infrastructure. The building's elevator had been temporarily out of service since I moved in 8 months ago, meaning I climbed 4 flights of stairs multiple times daily regardless of exhaustion. My morning alarm blared at 4:30. By 5:15, I was tying my apron at Brewington's, a locally owned coffee shop where I'd worked for nearly 2 years. The pre-dawn prep work was mind-numbing, grinding beans, stocking pastries, sanitizing equipment, but it was reliable income with decent tips. "Girl, you look like you slept standing up," Zoe commented one morning as I stifled my third yawn before opening. With her vibrant purple hair and constellation of ear piercings, Zoe had quickly become my closest friend since starting at Brewington's. "Bold of you to assume I slept at all," I replied, forcing a smile. Zoe knew my full story, one of the few people who did. She'd listen during our short breaks as I vented about family calls or financial stress, never judging, always offering her couch if I needed a place to crash. My budget was a masterclass in stretching pennies. After rent, utilities, student loan payments, car insurance, and groceries, I had exactly $43 of wiggle room each month. One unexpected expense, a flat tire, a doctor's visit, anything, meant skipping meals or borrowing from my meager emergency fund, which never seemed to grow beyond $300. My Brewington's shift ended at 1:30, giving me just enough time to rush home, change uniforms, and head to Gino's Pizzeria for my second job. 5 evenings a week, I delivered pizzas until midnight, navigating unfamiliar neighborhoods in my deteriorating Toyota, which now had 200,000 miles on the odometer and made concerning noises when I turned left. The physical toll was becoming unbearable. 70-plus hour work weeks left me with perpetual dark circles and frequent migraines. My hands were constantly dry and cracked from washing dishes and handling hot pizza boxes. I kept a tube of medicated lotion in both cars and applied it at red lights, a small luxury that prevented my skin from cracking and bleeding. Despite my independence, family dynamics continued to haunt me. My mother called weekly, but our conversations followed a predictable pattern. She'd spend 10 minutes updating me on Ethan's latest venture, currently his third attempt at a startup, a subscription box for pet owners, fully funded by my parents despite his previous failures. "He's meeting with investors next week," she'd gush. "Your father thinks this could be the big break." Only afterward would she ask how I was doing, but never with any real interest in my answers. When I mentioned my graphic design side projects, she'd respond with vague encouragement. "That's nice, dear. It's good to have hobbies." They still held weekly family dinners that I was always welcome to attend, but between exhaustion and resentment, I rarely made it more than once a month. When I did show up, Conversations revolved around Ethan's business prospects, while my work was dismissed as temporary despite supporting me for years. Last month, I'd attempted to secure a small business loan to launch my own graphic design business. I'd been freelancing on the side, building a modest portfolio between shifts, dreaming of turning it into my primary income. The loan officer had reviewed my application with thinly veiled skepticism. "Your portfolio shows promise," he'd said, "but with your current debt-to-income ratio and lack of business history, we can't approve this amount." I left the bank feeling defeated. That night, scrolling through Instagram, I saw photos of Ethan's new company car, purchased with my parents' co-signature. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. #blessed #entrepreneur." The resentment had been building for so long that some days it felt like a physical weight on my chest. I tried to focus on my own path, to release the bitterness, but it was difficult when the inequality remained so blatant. Last Tuesday was particularly brutal. My car's check engine light came on during morning deliveries. The coffee shop's espresso machine broke, causing a rush of angry customers. 3 separate pizza deliveries stiffed me on tips. By evening, I was running on fumes and caffeine, my whole body aching. Then my mother called. "Olivia, sweetheart, we need a small favor. Ethan's having some cash flow issues this month with the business. Could you possibly loan him $500? Just until his next investor meeting." I nearly drove off the road. The audacity of asking me, who could barely afford oil changes, to loan money to my perpetually supported brother broke something inside me. "Mom, I work 2 jobs and can barely make rent," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't have $500 to spare." "Well, if you'd come to dinner more often, you'd know we've invested everything in Ethan's business. We're stretched thin too." Her tone carried a hint of accusation, as if my absence was somehow causing their financial strain. After hanging up, I pulled into an empty parking lot and cried for the first time in months. Not delicate tears, but ugly, heaving sobs that left my uniform spotted and my face blotchy. I was approaching my breaking point, unsure how much longer I could sustain this exhausting existence. That Friday night, the universe seemed determined to test my limits. Storm clouds gathered as my shift began, and by 8 o'clock, rain pounded the city with vengeful intensity. Delivery drivers hate rain. It means slower driving, soaked clothes, and rarely any increase in tips despite the extra effort. I had no idea that this miserable rainy night would completely change the course of my life. The address on my final delivery of the night belonged to an upscale neighborhood where million-dollar homes sat behind manicured hedges. I'd delivered here before. The wealthy rarely tipped better than middle-class customers, despite their obvious abundance. This particular house was lit up with what appeared to be a party in full swing. Music thumped from inside as I balanced the stack of 4 extra-large pizzas under my rapidly failing umbrella. My uniform was already soaked through, my sneakers squelching with each step up the cobblestone walkway. A 20-something guy with a backward baseball cap and a beer in hand answered the door. He looked me up and down with obvious amusement at my drenched appearance. "Pizza's here," he yelled over his shoulder to raucous cheers from inside. He turned back to me. "How much?" $78.50, I replied, my customer service voice firmly in place despite my misery. He fumbled with his wallet, dropping several bills. "Keep the change," he slurred, handing me $80 for a $78 order. $1.50 tip for 4 pizzas in a downpour. "Thanks," I muttered, unable to completely mask my disappointment. As I turned to leave, someone inside called out, "Don't forget to make her wait in the rain while we find paper plates." Several people laughed. I walked back to my car, rain now seeping through my pizza delivery cap and running down my neck. My windshield wipers needed replacing, creating muddy streaks across the glass instead of clearing it. Perfect end to a perfect day, I thought bitterly. "Olivia? Olivia Morgan." The voice came from behind me as I reached for my car door. I turned, squinting through the rain at a tall figure standing under the shelter of a large black umbrella. He stepped closer, and I instinctively took a step back. "It's me," the man said, moving into the glow of a street lamp. "Your Uncle Raymond." I froze, staring at the face I hadn't seen in 8 years. He looked older, of course, with more gray in his dark hair and new lines around his eyes, but unmistakably my father's brother. The family resemblance was striking, the same strong jaw and straight nose, though Raymond's eyes held a warmth I rarely saw in my father's. "Uncle Raymond?" I finally managed, aware of how ridiculous I looked standing in the rain, soaked to the bone in my pizza delivery uniform with Geno's emblazoned across the chest. "What are you doing here?" he asked, genuine confusion in his voice. He stepped forward, extending his umbrella to cover me. "You're delivering pizzas?" The concern in his voice nearly undid me. It had been so long since anyone in my family had shown genuine interest in my welfare. Yes. "It's my second job," I stammered, suddenly self-conscious. "What are you doing here?" "My tech company sponsored this charity event," he explained, gesturing toward the house. "I stepped out for some air when I saw you walking up with the pizzas. I almost didn't believe it was you." An awkward silence fell between us, filled only by the sound of rain hitting his umbrella. 8 years of family secrets and unspoken questions hung in the air. "You're soaked," he finally said. "What time does your shift end?" I glanced at my watch. This was my last delivery, so technically now. "Would you consider having coffee with me?" he asked. "There's a 24-hour diner about 10 minutes from here." I'd really like to catch up. My first instinct was to decline. Whatever had happened between him and my father was serious enough to sever all ties. But something in his expression, genuine concern mixed with curiosity, made me hesitate. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said cautiously. "Dad doesn't exactly speak highly of you." A flash of pain crossed his features. "I'm sure he doesn't. But Olivia, I'm not asking to use you to get to your father. I'm honestly shocked to see my successful niece delivering pizzas in the rain at midnight." The word successful hit me like a physical blow. Is that how he remembered me? The straight-A student with big dreams? "Things change," I said simply. "They certainly do," he agreed. 1 hour. Just coffee. Then if you never want to see me again, I'll understand. My common sense warred with curiosity and a desperate hunger for connection with someone who remembered me before I became invisible in my own family. Plus, the prospect of sitting somewhere warm and dry was irresistible. 1 hour, I conceded. "Let me call my boss first." 30 minutes later, I sat across from Raymond in a vinyl booth at the Starlight Diner, my hair still damp, but my uniform covered by a dry sweater he had in his car. A mug of hot chocolate warmed my hands as I studied my long-lost uncle. Raymond hadn't just aged in the past 8 years, he'd transformed. The somewhat disheveled, constantly worried man from my childhood memories had been replaced by someone confident and composed. His suit was expensive but not flashy, his watch similarly high quality but understated. So he began after giving me time to settle. "Tell me what's happened since I saw you last." "Last I knew, you were headed for art school." The simple question opened a floodgate. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or the bizarre circumstances, or just the genuine interest in his expression, but I found myself telling him everything. The college fund that disappeared into Ethan's failed ventures. The student loans. The 2 jobs. The graphic design dreams perpetually on hold. Raymond listened without interrupting, his expression growing, increasingly troubled. When I finally ran out of words, he sat back, absently turning his coffee mug in his hands. "Your father and I had a similar childhood," he said after a thoughtful pause. "Our parents played favorites too, except I was the Ethan in the scenario." This revelation surprised me. "You were the favorite?" He nodded. "Golden boy. Star athlete. Could do no wrong. Your father was the responsible one who never got the same recognition." A sad smile crossed his face. "Ironic that he's repeating the same pattern, isn't it? So, what happened between you two?" I asked, The question that had lingered for years finally finding voice. Raymond sighed. We started a business together right out of college. A tech company before tech was trendy. Your father wanted to take a certain path, cutting corners, making deals that weren't entirely ethical. I disagreed. Things got ugly. I bought him out, and the company eventually succeeded beyond anything we'd imagined. He paused. He's never forgiven me for being right. The revelation hung between us. It contradicted everything I'd assumed about their falling out. What's the company? I asked. Ever heard of Raycom Technologies? My jaw dropped. Raycom was a major player in software development, regularly making headlines for innovation. That's yours? He nodded modestly. Among other ventures now. So you're comfortable, he finished with a slight smile. Which brings me to why I'm really troubled seeing you like this, Olivia. You have talent. I remember your artwork from when you were a teenager. You shouldn't be delivering pizzas at midnight. My pride flared instantly. I don't want charity. Good, he replied without missing a beat. I don't offer charity. But I do believe in investing in talent. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. We have a graphic design department. They're always looking for fresh perspectives. If you're interested, I can arrange an interview. I stared at the card, suspicion and hope warring within me. Because I'm your niece? Because from what I remember, you're good. And from what you've told me tonight, you're tenacious, responsible, and hardworking. His expression softened. The family connection might get you an interview, Olivia. But it won't keep you the job if you can't perform. I picked up the card, turning it over in my fingers. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He glanced at his watch. It's been more than an hour. I should let you get home and rest. As we walked to our cars, Raymond stopped me with a gentle hand on my shoulder. Olivia, whatever you decide about the job, please know you can call me anytime. 8 years is too long to lose touch with family. For the first time that night, tears threatened. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and watched as he drove away in a modest sedan that nonetheless probably cost more than I'd make in 3 years. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine, the business card clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Part of me wanted to tear it up, to reject anything connected to the family that had rejected me. But another part, the part that was bone-tired from fighting alone for so long, whispered that sometimes help comes from unexpected places. That night, I slept better than I had in months, the business card on my nightstand catching the first light of dawn. 3 days passed before I worked up the courage to call the number on Raymond's card. During those days, I researched everything I could about Raycom Technologies, learning about their innovative software solutions, their above-average employee benefits, and their reputation for a positive work culture. Most importantly, I studied their design work, the clean interfaces, the thoughtful branding, the attention to user experience. Their standards were exceptionally high. When I finally called, Raymond's assistant connected me immediately. I was hoping I'd hear from you, he said, his voice warm. Have you thought about what we discussed? Yes, I replied, fingers nervously twisting the cord of my ancient landline phone. I'm interested in the interview, but I have conditions. I'm listening. If I get this opportunity, it has to be because I deserve it professionally. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no nepotism. The words came out stronger than I felt. I need to know I earned it. There was a pause, then Raymond chuckled. You really are nothing like your brother. Before I could respond, he continued, how about this? Come to our downtown office tomorrow at 10. Bring your portfolio. You'll interview with Jessica Chen, our design director. She doesn't suffer fools or favor family connections. She'll give you an honest assessment. She knows I'm your niece? She will, because transparency matters. But trust me, that fact will work against you rather than for you with Jessica. She'll scrutinize you more carefully to ensure there's no favoritism. That wasn't entirely comforting, but it was what I'd asked for. We arranged the details, and I spent the night frantically updating my portfolio, selecting my best work, and preparing explanations for each design choice. Raycom's headquarters occupied 10 floors of a gleaming downtown office tower. The lobby featured sleek furnishings, living green walls, and a subtle logo etched into glass panels. It screamed success without being ostentatious, much like Raymond himself, I realized. The receptionist directed me to the 24th floor, where Raymond met me personally. He looked completely at home in this environment of quiet prosperity, greeting several employees by name as he led me through an open office space filled with natural light and collaborative workstations. "Jessica's waiting in the conference room," he said, stopping at a glass-walled meeting space where a woman with a sleek bob and rectangular glasses studied something on a tablet. "Remember, she doesn't know you're interviewing yet. This is just an informational meeting about our design needs and your portfolio." The distinction seemed meaningful to him, so I nodded, clutching my portfolio case like a shield. Jessica Chin was intimidating in the way only truly confident people can be. She assessed me with a quick glance as I entered, her expression revealing nothing. "So you're Richard's daughter," she said after introductions, referencing my father without warmth or animosity. "Just fact." "Yes, but I'm here based on my own merit," I replied, perhaps too defensively. One eyebrow arched slightly. "We'll see." She turned to Raymond. "I'll take it from here." Raymond nodded and left us alone. For the next hour, Jessica methodically went through my portfolio, asking pointed questions about my process, my influences, and my technical skills. She made no attempt to be encouraging or friendly, but her questions were insightful and challenging in ways that pushed me to articulate my design philosophy more clearly than I ever had before. "Your typography needs refinement," she said bluntly, pointing to a poster design. "But your color theory is strong, and you have good instincts for visual hierarchy." This piece here, she tapped a branding concept I'd created for a local bakery, shows promise. By the end of the meeting, my nerves had given way to a strange sense of exhilaration. Jessica's critique was the most professional feedback I'd ever received, free from the condescension or dismissiveness I'd grown accustomed to. "We have an internship program," she said finally, closing my portfolio. "It's paid, but not extravagantly. 3 months, with potential for permanent position afterward. You'd be working directly with our design team on real projects, not getting coffee." She fixed me with a penetrating stare. "Raymond wants me to hire you outright, but I don't operate that way, regardless of family connections." "I wouldn't want you to," I assured her. "The internship starts next Monday. 9 to 5, business casual. Can you manage that with your other jobs?" My heart raced. This was happening. "I'll make it work." "Good." She handed me a folder with paperwork. "Fill these out before you leave today." "And Olivia." Her expression softened marginally. "Your work shows talent, but it needs discipline and mentorship. That's what we offer here. Whether you succeed or not is entirely up to you." Walking out of that meeting felt like floating. For the first time in years, someone was giving me an opportunity based on potential they actually saw in me, not obligation or charity. Raymond was waiting near the elevator, trying and failing to look casual. "Well, I start Monday," I said, unable to suppress a smile. "As an intern." He grinned. "Jessica doesn't believe in shortcuts." "That's actually a good sign." His expression grew more serious. "Will you be able to manage with your other jobs?" Reality crashed back. The internship hours would conflict with my barista shifts, and while it was paid, the starting stipend wouldn't replace both my current incomes. "I'll figure it out," I said, already calculating numbers in my head. That afternoon, I had difficult conversations with both my employers. The coffee shop manager, understanding my situation, offered to keep me on for weekend shifts. "You're too valuable to lose completely," she said kindly. "And this opportunity sounds perfect for you." Quitting the pizza delivery job was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in years, my evenings would be my own, but my financial cushion would be razor thin until the internship potentially converted to a full-time position. The first few weeks at Raycom were a whirlwind of learning and adjustment. I quickly discovered that while my technical skills were reasonably strong, my professional experience was sorely lacking. Jessica assigned me to shadow different team members, absorbing their workflows and processes while contributing to small aspects of ongoing projects. Imposter syndrome hit hard during those initial days. Everyone seemed so confident, so knowledgeable, while I felt like I was constantly playing catch-up. I stayed late most evenings, practicing techniques I'd observed during the day and studying industry standards online. Jessica noticed. "Dedication is admirable," she commented one night, finding me still at my workstation at 8:30. "But burnout is real. Pace yourself." Despite her brisk manner, Jessica proved to be an incredible mentor. She never sugarcoated criticism, but she also acknowledged improvement with the same straightforward honesty. Under her guidance, my skills developed rapidly, my confidence growing alongside my competence. Raymond maintained a careful professional distance at the office, treating me like any other intern. But occasionally he'd stop by my desk with a coffee and quiet words of encouragement, or send articles related to design trends he thought might interest me. His subtle support meant more than I could express. When I received my first real design assignment, creating social media graphics for a product launch, the satisfaction of seeing my work published under the Raycom brand was indescribable. For the first time, I felt like my creativity had real value in the world. My first internship paycheck, while modest, covered my rent without the desperate juggling act of previous months. By the second month, I was able to move to a slightly better apartment, one where the elevator actually worked and the hot water didn't mysteriously disappear on weekends. When I called my parents to share my news about the internship, their reaction was predictably underwhelming. "An internship at your age?" my mother questioned. "Shouldn't you be in a real job by now?" "It is a real job, Mom. With a respected company." "Raymond's company," my father interjected, his voice immediately cooling. "So, that's his game. Using you to get back at me." "This isn't about you, Dad," I replied, frustration mounting. "This is about me finally having an opportunity to use my skills." "Just be careful," he warned. "Raymond always has ulterior motives." Even Ethan couldn't resist a dig when he heard about my new position. "Must be nice having connections," he commented during a rare family dinner I attended. "Some of us have to make it on our own merits." The irony was so thick I nearly choked on my pasta, but I held my tongue. Their perception didn't matter anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I was on a path of my own making, with people who valued what I brought to the table. 3 months into my internship, I barely recognized my professional self. Under Jessica's meticulous guidance and Raymond's occasional strategic advice, my design skills had transformed. I no longer created merely attractive visuals. I crafted strategic communications that served specific business goals while maintaining aesthetic integrity. My responsibilities had gradually increased from supporting others' projects to leading small initiatives of my own. My weekend coffee shop shifts continued, partly for financial security but increasingly because I enjoyed the change of pace and the connection with regular customers. "You seem different," Zoe commented one Saturday morning as we prepared for opening. "More, I don't know, centered." I considered her observation while wiping down counters. "I feel different. Like I'm finally moving forward instead of just treading water." Raymond had become a significant presence in my life, our professional relationship evolving into a genuine mentorship. He never criticized my parents directly but offered perspectives that helped me understand our family dynamics through a different lens. "Success isn't just about talent," he told me during one of our occasional lunch meetings. "It's about opportunity and support. Some people get those handed to them, others have to fight for every scrap. The fighting makes you stronger, but it shouldn't have to be that hard." My improved financial situation allowed me to move into a one-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood. Nothing luxurious, but clean and well-maintained, with actual natural light and neighbors who didn't have screaming arguments at 3 in the morning. The first night I slept there, the quiet was so profound I actually woke up disoriented by the lack of ambient noise. My first real paycheck that covered all my bills comfortably arrived on a Thursday. I remember staring at my bank account balance, refreshing the screen several times to confirm the number was real. After paying rent, utilities, and my student loan payment, I still had money left over. Not just survival money, actual discretionary income. I celebrated by buying fresh flowers for my apartment and a new professional outfit that wasn't from a thrift store. The growing distance from my family's toxicity helped me see their behavior more clearly. I began setting boundaries, limiting calls with my mother to once weekly and declining dinner invitations when I needed time for myself. This newfound assertiveness didn't go unnoticed. "You never have time for family anymore," my mother complained during one of our calls. "Success is changing you." "I'm the same person, Mom. I'm just not available on demand anymore." The real conflict erupted when Ethan's latest business venture began showing signs of trouble. His subscription box service for pet owners had launched with my parents' financial backing, but customer retention was abysmal after the first month's novelty wore off. One evening, my phone rang with my father's number, an unusual occurrence that immediately put me on alert. "Olivia," he began without preamble, "your brother needs some temporary assistance. His business is having cash flow issues." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied carefully. "We thought, since you're doing well now with this internship, you might be able to loan him a few thousand to tide him over." The request was so absurd I initially thought I'd misheard. "A few $1,000s? Dad, I just started making a stable income 3 months ago." "Family helps family," he pressed. "You know we'd do the same for you." A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Would you?" "Because I don't recall any offers of help when I was working 2 jobs to survive. That was different. You chose that path." I didn't choose to have my college fund given to Ethan. I didn't choose to be the only one expected to stand on my own while he got endless bailouts. My father's voice hardened. "This attitude, this is Raymond's influence, isn't it? He's always been jealous of family loyalty." The accusation ignited something within me. "This has nothing to do with Uncle Raymond. This is about years of different standards for Ethan and me. You're being selfish, Olivia. After everything we've done for you." That was the breaking point. Years of suppressed feelings erupted. "What exactly have you done for me, Dad? Name one thing you've sacrificed for my benefit the way you consistently sacrifice for Ethan." His silence was damning. "I thought so," I said quietly. "I won't be loaning money to Ethan. I'm still recovering from years of financial struggle that neither of you ever acknowledged." The conversation ended with my father's cold disappointment, a familiar weight I was finally ready to shrug off. The following Sunday, against my better judgment, I attended family dinner, partly to demonstrate I wasn't afraid of confrontation and partly hoping for some reconciliation. It was a mistake. The tension was palpable from the moment I arrived. My mother's usual effusive greeting was replaced with cool politeness. My father barely acknowledged me. Ethan sat smugly at his usual place, clearly having been informed of my selfishness. Dinner proceeded with stilted conversation until my mother mentioned Raymond. "I hear his company is doing very well," she said with forced casualness. "Expanded into 3 new markets this year." "Yes," I replied, sensing the trap but unwilling to lie. "The growth has been impressive." My father's fork clattered against his plate. "I suppose he's filled your head with his version of our history." "He's barely mentioned it, actually. Unlike you, he doesn't seem interested in nursing old grudges." "You have no idea what you're talking about," my father snapped. "Raymond betrayed me. He stole my ideas, pushed me out of our company, and then had the nerve to succeed with my concepts." "That's not how he tells it," I replied evenly. "Of course not. He's always been manipulative. And now he's using you to get back at me. I set down my utensils, suddenly tired of the whole charade. Dad, did it ever occur to you that he hired me because I'm qualified? That not everything revolves around your feud? You wouldn't even know him if not for me, my father retorted. True. Just like I wouldn't know what it feels like to be constantly overlooked in favor of my brother if not for you. The room fell silent. My mother's eyes widened in shock, Ethan shifted uncomfortably, and my father's face flushed dark red. Is that really how you feel? My mother asked quietly. How could I feel any other way? Look at this situation objectively. Ethan fails repeatedly with your financial support. I work myself to exhaustion without asking for help, finally get an opportunity through my own merit, and the first thing you do is ask me to give my hard-earned money to bail him out again. We've always treated you both equally, my father insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Dad, you know that's not true. You've never even tried to hide the favoritism. Ethan finally spoke up, his voice defensive. It's not my fault they helped me more. No, it's not your fault, I agreed, surprising him. It's their choice. But it is your responsibility to recognize the privilege and stop taking it for granted. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence. As I prepared to leave, my father stopped me at the door. Raymond destroyed our family business, he said, his voice low and intense. He'll do the same to you when it suits him. I studied my father's face, seeing for the first time the insecurity behind his anger. I'm sorry you believe that, but I'm not going to let your grudge determine my relationships. Driving home that night, I felt strangely lighter despite the conflict. Speaking my truth after years of silence was terrifying but necessary. The next day, I called Raymond and asked if we could meet outside of work. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, I asked him directly about the conflict with my father. I've only heard his side, I explained. I'd like to hear yours. Raymond sighed deeply, running a hand through his graying hair. Your father and I had different visions for the company we started. He wanted quick profit, even if it meant cutting ethical corners. I wanted sustainable growth built on solid values. He looked at me directly. The breaking point came when I discovered he was altering financial reports to attract investors. When I confronted him, he claimed it was just creative accounting. I couldn't be part of that. So you bought him out? I gave him the chance to buy me out first, actually. When he couldn't raise the capital, I leveraged everything I had to purchase his share. He took the money but never forgave me for the perceived betrayal. His expression softened. Richard has always struggled with accepting responsibility for his choices. It's easier to blame others. The parallel to my father's relationship with Ethan was striking. A pattern of enabling, of excusing, of avoiding hard truths. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. It helps make sense of a lot of things. As I returned to work that week, an exciting opportunity arose. Jessica approached me about leading a major project for an important client, a complete rebranding for a regional healthcare provider. It's beyond your current role, she admitted. But I've seen enough of your work to believe you're ready for the challenge with proper supervision. The responsibility terrified and thrilled me simultaneously. This was no small assignment. It would be highly visible within the company and could define my professional trajectory. For the first time in my life, self-doubt threatened to overwhelm a golden opportunity. What if I failed? What if I proved my father right about Raymond's judgment? What if I wasn't actually talented, just lucky? Late one evening, as I stared at initial concept sketches that refused to coalesce into something meaningful, Raymond found me in the empty office. Creative block? He asked, settling into a chair beside my desk. I nodded miserably. I'm not sure I'm ready for this project. You are, he said simply. Jessica doesn't make recommendations lightly. She sees what you're capable of, even when you don't. But what if I fail? Then you learn and do better next time. His smile was gentle. Failure isn't fatal, Olivia. It's just information. That perspective, so different from my father's perfectionism, gave me permission to take risks with my design approach. The next morning, I started fresh, approaching the healthcare branding from a patient-centered perspective that ultimately resonated deeply with the client. The project became a turning point in my professional development, pushing me to synthesize everything I'd learned while finding my unique voice as a designer. With Raymond's strategic guidance and Jessica's technical mentorship, I navigated the complex project successfully, earning praise from the client and recognition within the company. More importantly, I proved to myself that I belonged in this world of creative professionals, not as Raymond's niece or Richard's daughter, but as Olivia Morgan, designer in her own right. 6 months into my time at Raycom, the healthcare rebranding project's success led to Jessica calling me into her office for an unexpected meeting. Raymond was there too, his expression carefully neutral. The internship period ended 2 months ago, Jessica began without preamble. We've kept you in that status while evaluating your performance. My stomach tightened. Despite positive feedback, the corporate world had taught me to expect the worst. After reviewing your contributions, particularly on the healthcare project, we'd like to offer you a full-time position as a junior designer, she continued, sliding a folder across her desk. This includes a significant salary increase, full benefits, and a clear advancement path. The folder contained an offer letter with a salary figure that made me blink twice to ensure I wasn't misreading. It was more than triple what I'd made at both my previous jobs combined. Take the weekend to consider it, Raymond added. This isn't about family, Olivia. This is about the value you bring to our team. That evening, I celebrated with a small splurge, dinner at an actual restaurant rather than takeout eaten over my keyboard. I chose a new place downtown that had opened to excellent reviews, treating myself to a proper meal with appetizer and dessert, reveling in this milestone achievement. As I was finishing my chocolate mousse, a familiar voice called my name. I looked up to see Ethan approaching my table, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize. Thought that was you, he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Mind if we join you for a minute? Before I could respond, they were sitting down. The woman, introduced as Melissa, his new girlfriend, excused herself to the restroom almost immediately, leaving us alone. Celebrating something? Ethan asked, eyeing my dessert and glass of wine. Job offer, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Full-time position at Raycom. Good for you, he said, though his expression tightened. He glanced around to ensure Melissa wasn't returning yet, then leaned forward. Look, I didn't want to do this here, but since I ran into you, things aren't good, Liv. The childhood nickname, and used for years, immediately put me on alert. Ethan only reverted to it when he wanted something. What things? The business tanked completely, he admitted, voice low. The investors pulled out last week. Mom and Dad. He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. They're in serious trouble, Olivia. They put everything into this venture. Second mortgage on the house, cashed out retirement accounts, everything. The news hit like a physical blow. How bad is it? Bad enough that they might lose the house within months. His eyes met mine, pleading. They won't tell you because they're too proud, especially after that fight at dinner. But I thought you should know. After Ethan and Melissa left, I sat stunned, dessert forgotten. My parents had always been financially comfortable. The idea of them facing ruin was inconceivable. Despite our strained relationship, the thought of them losing their home of 30 years was deeply troubling. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house unannounced. The changes were subtle but telling. The normally immaculate lawn needed mowing. The flower beds were untended, and my father's prized car was missing from the driveway. My mother answered the door in a faded house dress, her hair pulled back carelessly, a stark contrast to her usually meticulous appearance. Her surprise at seeing me quickly shifted to nervous energy as she ushered me inside. "This is unexpected," she said, hurriedly clearing magazines from the coffee table. "Your father's just run to the store. Would you like some tea?" The house's interior revealed more signs of strain. The thermostat was set unusually low. Mail was piled unopened on the entry table. A water stain on the ceiling suggested a leak no one had addressed. "Mom," I said gently, stopping her nervous tidying. "I saw Ethan last night. He told me what's happening." Her movements stilled. For a moment, she seemed about to deny everything, then her shoulders slumped in defeat. "We didn't want you to know." "Why not?" "Pride, I suppose." She sank onto the sofa. "After how we treated you, asking for help seemed unthinkable." As she spoke, the full extent of their financial disaster emerged. My father's company had downsized months ago, reducing his salary by 30%. Rather than adjusting their lifestyle, they'd maintained appearances while drawing down savings. Then came Ethan's business, their sure-thing investment that would solve everything. "We believed in him," my mother said, tears forming. "Just like we always have." Richard put in our retirement savings first. When that wasn't enough, we took a second mortgage. "How much did you invest total?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Almost $400,000, she whispered. The figure was staggering. "And it's all gone." She nodded miserably. "The company collapsed completely. There's nothing to salvage." My father returned home during this conversation, his expression hardening when he saw me. "Ethan had no right to tell you," he said, setting down grocery bags that I noticed contained only store-brand basics, another sign of their new reality. "I'm your daughter," I replied. "I had every right to know." "So you could gloat?" "Tell us I told you so about Ethan." "No," I said firmly. "So I could help if possible." His laugh was bitter. "Help? What could you possibly do about this?" "Richard," my mother interjected sharply. "That's enough." Something in her tone, a newfound steel I'd never heard directed at him before, made my father fall silent. He sat heavily in his armchair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "I've enabled this situation for too long," my mother continued, surprising both of us. "The way we've treated Olivia compared to Ethan, the financial decisions, all of it. I've gone along with everything, and look where it's gotten us." "Sophia," my father began, but she cut him off. "No, Richard. It's time for honesty." She turned to me, her eyes red but clear. "When you were born, your father was so certain you'd be another boy. He'd already planned fishing trips and baseball games. When the nurse said it's a girl, I saw his disappointment. I've spent 23 years trying to compensate for that moment, letting him favor Ethan to make up for it. That was wrong." My father stared at her, shock evident on his face. "That's not true." "I never." "It is true," she insisted. "You may not have realized it, but I did. And I allowed it because it was easier than confronting you." She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Olivia. We failed you." The raw honesty of her confession left me speechless. For years, I'd assumed my mother was simply following my father's lead in favoring Ethan. The revelation that she had recognized the injustice all along but chosen to enable it added a new layer of complexity to my childhood memories. "There's something else you should know," my mother continued after a moment. "About Raymond and your father." My father stood abruptly. "Sophia, don't." "She deserves the truth, Richard." My mother's gaze remained steady. "Raymond tried to warn us about investing in Ethan's ventures. Years ago, when you were in college and we used your fund for Ethan's first business. Raymond came to us after he found out. He offered to replace your college fund himself." "What?" I turned to my father in disbelief. "We refused," my mother continued. "Your father saw it as charity, as Raymond showing off his success." She sighed deeply. "The fight they had. Raymond said we were repeating the patterns from their childhood, creating another generation of inequality. Your father threw him out of the house, told him never to contact us again." The revelation stunned me into silence. All these years, I'd imagined their feud centered entirely on business disagreements. The truth, that Raymond had tried to intervene on my behalf, shifted my understanding of everything. "Is that true?" I finally asked my father. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He had no right to interfere in how we raised our children. He was trying to help me, I said, the realization dawning slowly. And you rejected it because of your pride. The three of us sat in heavy silence, years of family dynamics suddenly exposed in harsh light. My father's resentment toward his more successful brother. My mother's silent complicity. The pattern of favoritism that had shaped my entire life. I need some air, I said finally, rising from the couch. Outside on the porch, I called Raymond. Can we meet? There's something important we need to discuss. That evening at a quiet park near the river, I told Raymond everything. My parents' financial disaster, my mother's confessions, the revelation about his offer years ago. Why didn't you tell me you tried to replace my college fund? I asked. He sighed, watching the sunset reflect on the water. What purpose would it have served? It would have seemed like I was trying to turn you against your father. But all these years, I thought. You thought I abandoned you too. His eyes were sad when they met mine. I'm sorry for that. After your father cut contact, I tried reaching out to you directly a few times, but the messages were never returned. I assumed you wanted nothing to do with me either. I never received any messages, I said, the puzzle pieces finally fitting together. They must have intercepted them. Raymond nodded thoughtfully. Your father and I. Our relationship has always been complicated. He resented me for being our parents' favorite, then resented me more for succeeding after he chose to leave our company. He turned to face me fully. But Olivia, despite everything, he's still my brother. And he's still your father. A father who chose his pride over my education, I pointed out bitterly. Yes, Raymond acknowledged. But also a man trapped in patterns he learned from his own father. That doesn't excuse his behavior, but it might help explain it. We sat in contemplative silence as darkness fell around us. Finally, I asked the question that had been forming since learning the extent of my parents' situation. What would you do if you were me? Raymond considered this carefully. I'd probably help them, but with conditions. Breaking destructive patterns requires more than financial rescue. It requires fundamental change. He paused. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. This is your decision, not mine. The conversation with Raymond provided clarity I desperately needed. Over the next few days, I developed a plan, not just to address my parents' immediate crisis, but to help heal our family's deeper dysfunctions. 6 months after discovering my parents' financial crisis, I stood in my new office at Raycom, arranging family photos on the credenza behind my desk. The glass-framed promotion certificate to senior designer still felt surreal, especially considering my journey from delivering pizzas in the rain just a year earlier. My career had flourished beyond my most ambitious dreams. The healthcare rebranding project had won an industry award, establishing my reputation within the company. More importantly, I developed confidence in my abilities that no external validation could provide. Jessica still pushed me relentlessly, but now as a respected colleague rather than a tentative intern. My personal transformation had been equally profound. The exhausted, resentful young woman delivering pizzas in the rain had become someone who faced challenges directly, set healthy boundaries, and recognized her own worth independent of family validation. After careful consideration, I had decided to help my parents, but on terms that required real change rather than enabling continued dysfunction. The first step was arranging a meeting with a financial advisor specializing in retirement crisis management. I paid for the consultation as a non-negotiable condition of my assistance. The advisor's assessment was sobering but not hopeless. With significant lifestyle adjustments and a structured repayment plan, my parents could avoid losing their house, though their retirement would be delayed by several years. I contributed a portion of my savings towards stabilizing their immediate situation, structured as a formal loan with documented terms rather than an open-ended bailout. My most controversial condition, Ethan had to get a real job and contribute to the family's recovery. No more entrepreneurial ventures funded by parents who couldn't afford it. No more living rent-free while pursuing the next big idea. "That's unfair," Ethan had protested when I presented these terms during a tense family meeting. "You're punishing me for trying to build something." "I'm not punishing you," I replied calmly. "I'm asking you to take responsibility for your part in this situation. You accepted money you knew they couldn't afford to give." It took 3 weeks of sulking before Ethan finally accepted reality, taking an entry-level position at a marketing firm. The regular paycheck and structured environment were initially foreign concepts to him, but gradually, something unexpected happened. He began to take pride in earning his way. The most difficult aspect of my plan was the requirement for family therapy. My father initially refused outright, viewing it as an admission of failure. My mother, however, had reached her breaking point. "We're doing this, Richard," she said with newfound firmness. "If not for us, then for our children. We've damaged them both in different ways." Those weekly sessions became the foundation for healing decades of dysfunction. Under the guidance of Dr. Winters, a family therapist specializing in adult parent-child relationships, we slowly began unpacking the complex dynamics that had shaped our family. My father's journey was particularly challenging. Acknowledging his favoritism meant confronting his own childhood wounds, the constant comparison to Raymond, the feeling of never measuring up to his older brother. "I didn't want Ethan to feel what I felt growing up," he admitted during one particularly raw session. "But instead, I made Olivia feel exactly that way." That admission, the first time he'd acknowledged the pattern directly, marked a turning point. Progress wasn't linear, with setbacks and difficult conversations along the way, but the trajectory moved steadily toward greater understanding. My mother worked diligently to rebuild our relationship, making efforts that ranged from small gestures like calling just to check on me without mentioning Ethan, to larger acknowledgments of how her passivity had enabled the unequal treatment. "I failed you by not speaking up," she told me during a private lunch. "I can't change the past, but I can promise to do better now." Ethan's growth was perhaps the most surprising. Removed from the cushion of parental bailouts, he struggled initially with the expectations of regular employment. There were missed deadlines, conflicts with supervisors, and late-night calls bemoaning the unfairness of it all. But slowly, incrementally, he began developing skills he'd never needed before: perseverance, accountability, delayed gratification. 6 months into his job, he was promoted to junior account manager based on genuine merit. The pride in his accomplishment was qualitatively different from his previous hollow bravado. "It's weird," he confessed during one of our newly established monthly sibling dinners, "but earning something feels better somehow, even though it's smaller than what I was aiming for with the business." Raymond's gradual reconciliation with my father represented another healing dimension of our family story. It began with small steps: Raymond attending one therapy session at my request, my father accepting an invitation to tour Raycom's offices. Old wounds couldn't be erased overnight, but the brothers began the slow work of building a new relationship based on who they were now rather than who they had been. The culmination of this year of transformation came on Thanksgiving, precisely 1 year after I had delivered pizzas in the rain and encountered Raymond. We gathered at my parents' home, the first time our complete family had been together in nearly a decade. The differences from previous family gatherings were striking. My father, having sold his luxury car and embraced a more modest lifestyle, seemed less burdened by the need to project success. My mother, who had returned to teaching piano to contribute to their financial recovery, displayed a quiet confidence I'd never seen before. Ethan arrived with his girlfriend Melissa and something entirely new: humility. And Raymond, once the forbidden name in our household, sat at my father's right hand, their conversation occasionally tense, but fundamentally respectful. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for coffee, my father cleared his throat. "I'd like to say something," he began, uncharacteristically hesitant. "This past year has been difficult. We lost a lot: money, security, pride." He paused, gathering himself. "But we gained something more valuable: honesty. understanding, a chance to repair what was broken. He looked directly at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Olivia, I owe you the biggest apology. Not just for the recent past, but for a lifetime of making you feel less valued, less important. I was wrong, and I am more proud of you than I can possibly express. The words I'd waited a lifetime to hear washed over me like a cleansing rain. They couldn't erase the past, but they created space for a different future. Later that evening, as guests prepared to leave, Raymond pulled me aside. Do you remember what you told me that night at the diner? That you didn't want charity. I nodded, smiling at the memory of my fierce pride despite being soaked and exhausted. I knew then you'd be extraordinary, he said. Not because you're my niece or because you have natural talent, though you do, but because you understand that true success comes from within, not from what's handed to you. A month later, Raycom launched a mentorship program for underprivileged students interested in design careers. As the program coordinator, I found myself guiding a nervous young intern through her first professional project. I don't belong here, she confessed during our initial meeting. Everyone else seems so confident, so prepared. I felt exactly the same way, I told her, remembering my own insecurities. But belonging isn't about starting with all the answers. It's about being willing to ask the questions and do the work. Watching her progress over the following weeks, I recognized my own journey reflected in her growing confidence. The cycle of mentorship had come full circle, transforming me from the one who needed guidance to the one who could provide it. This, perhaps, is the deepest lesson I've learned through everything. Our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts to others if we're willing to transform them through honesty and growth. The unequal treatment that caused me so much pain gave me unique insight into supporting others who feel overlooked or undervalued. Life will never be perfectly fair. Some people will always have advantages others don't, whether from family connections, financial resources, or simple luck. The question isn't whether inequality exists, but how we respond to it. Do we allow resentment to consume us? Do we perpetuate the patterns that harmed us? Or do we forge our own path, building something meaningful from whatever foundation we're given? I still deliver coffee on occasional weekends, not because I need the money, but because it grounds me in gratitude for how far I've come. Sometimes the most difficult paths lead to the most meaningful destinations. My journey certainly did. Have you ever felt like the underdog in your own family? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of overcoming family challenges. Remember, sometimes the people who've been given the least develop the strength to achieve the most. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings some comfort if you're still finding your way through similar struggles.